Hey, welcome to the Lead Up Podcast. I'm your host and publisher, Mike Harbour. Really excited to kick off the new year of 2025 with you today. This is going to be the first in a series of 12 or 13 we will do from our elite leadership coaching and training lessons. I'm going to record several of these throughout the year. I'm really excited because we're going to explore practical insights and strategies to empower leaders like you to thrive and make a difference this year, to be elite in your leadership this year. It's often said that attitude determines your altitude, and nowhere is this more true than in your leadership. Attitude isn't just a personal trait, it's contagious. It's the most contagious thing in your culture, in your leadership, in your team. It's about setting the tone for your team and your organization. But how do you cultivate a winning mindset amidst the pressures of leadership? How do you get your attitude right to lead others to that next level? That's exactly what we're going to tackle today in this episode called The Attitude Advantage. I'm going to share 3 keys to cultivating a winning mindset, a winning attitude in leadership. By the end of this episode, what I'm going to give you is you'll be able to walk away with some actionable strategies to model positivity, foster resilience, and inspire your team even in the face of challenges. So I want to challenge you to go ahead and get ready to shift your mindset so that it helps you make a lasting impact. So let's talk about key number 1, the ripple effect of attitude. We all know that leadership is full and ups and downs. As we kind of reflect back on last year, maybe you had a lot of ups, maybe you experienced several down cycles in your leadership as well. Look, first of all, I want to say to you, that's normal. There's not some secret to leadership that you don't have figured out. Every leader, and I've worked with thousands and thousands of leaders, every leader experiences great highs and great lows. And sometimes that's determined by you. Sometimes that's determined by the team. Sometimes it's determined by outside factors that you have absolutely no control of. But what I'm a fan of is helping you control the things you can control, not those external factors. It's not, one of the things I want you to understand is it's not an easy field by any measure. Leadership isn't. But think about this for a second. As a leader, how often do you consider the ripple effect of your own attitude on the people around you? Now, I teach many times in my communication workshops this idea of energy. So I'll give you an example of that. You can walk in the room oftentimes. I'm sure you've experienced this. If you've been in a significant relationship with anybody, certainly you have walked in the room before and you felt like something was wrong. Nothing was said. Maybe nothing was even, no, there wasn't even a glare at you. No one was even looking at you, but you could just feel like something was going on. There was something wrong, something unsettled in that room. That's an energy. So when you think about that, think about the ripple effect of your energy, the ripple effect of your attitude as a leader and how it moves throughout the department, the organization, the team that you lead. What happens when you walk into a meeting with frustration written all over your face? People can feel that. Or when you react negatively to a setback, it creates a wave, a ripple that impacts not just your team's behavior, but also their mindset. Like what happens the next time they see you coming? Maybe you're in a great mood the next time they see you coming, but what mindset have you created within them that's going to impact their performance and their desire to follow your leadership? See, a leader's attitude is like the thermostat of a workplace. It doesn't just measure the temperature, it sets it, it creates it. People pick up on your attitude, your energy, and many people determine how much effort, how much discretionary effort they're going to give to the work that they're asked to do based on how the leader treats them, how they feel about the leader. Now, for years and years, we've been talking about employee engagement. Employees who are fully engaged are often said to give us discretionary effort, meaning they work a little bit harder than they are expected to work. They do more than what's required. How many of you listening today would like to have more of your employees give a little bit more effort than they normally do, to give you just a little bit more than is required? I bet if I were to take a poll and I were sitting in front of the thousands that are listening to this podcast, they would all raise their hand and say, yeah, I would like that. Well, I just want to challenge you to realize that it begins with you. It begins with your attitude. Now, I'm not saying that you have to do everything perfectly, and I'm not saying that even if you have a perfect attitude every day that you're going to get that more effort, that more discretionary effort from those that you work with. But I do know this, that if you don't work on your own attitude, you won't experience that. For me, I tried hard to change my attitude every day. When I left the Army in 1998, I was active duty in the U.S. Army. And I started my civilian life after 6 years of being part of that active Army service. And the worst leader and leaders that I experienced were in my first civilian job, believe it or not. Now, I'm not going to say that everybody I worked with and worked for while I was in the military was perfect. I even had a job while I was in high school, my first year of college, where I worked for a really poor leader, but kind of a bully, screamer, yeller, cusser. But it was in that first civilian job that I really experienced leadership where there was poor attitude. And that was really tough on me because for years, I'd been surrounded mostly by high performers, challenging the status quo, pushing the limits. That's where I spent most of my time when I was in the military, around people like that. Now, for me, I stayed in that job for 3 years too long. I was in that job 3 years, a little over 3 years and 3 months to be exact. But I stayed in that job for too long. And I tried hard to change the attitudes of those around me every day. I would be the first one in the office, which, by the way, one of the guys, the older employees there, hated that because he had always been the one to be in early. Now, he didn't really come in early. He just thought he was the first one in the office. And he hated like my attitude. And I would say something to him when he would come in. I'd already be at my desk and I'd pop up. We had these cubicles that were about, 4 foot high, and I could stand up and look over them. And I would stand up and say, hey, Tony, good top of the morning to you. I'd say something, nice to him. And he just kind of grunt at me or growl every day. And I'd welcome him with that smile. And unfortunately, the boss wasn't much better. This guy wasn't a boss. He was just a coworker. The boss wasn't much better. And it was the attitudes in there that created the culture, that created the environment that was really hard to be a part of. And often my attitude would sour from that. To understand in this example that 70% of employee engagement, I talked about employee engagement a minute ago, 70% of employee engagement is influenced by the direct manager. So those employees that you're leading, their engagement is determined. 70% of their influence, of their engagement, is influenced by you. So studies consistently show the way the leader shows up emotionally has a direct, measurable impact on the team's morale, focus, and their overall effectiveness. The sad part is many leaders aren't aware their attitude is possibly creating negativity. They blame the employees instead of being the change they wish to see in others. We all know that quote, right, from Gandhi. Be the change you wish to see in the world. Be the change you wish to see in others from a leadership perspective. Now, imagine flipping the script. modeling optimism, even when things get tough. When you do that, you're giving permission to everyone around you to stay grounded and focused. Zig Ziglar, Zig is passed now, but he's an old motivational speaker. If you're not familiar with him, go look him up. But he would often say, he said, motivation doesn't last. Neither does bathing. That's why we recommend it daily. See, motivation, our attitude is very similar to that. We must work on it every day because there's things that impact you in your life, and they're going to impact your attitude. They're going to impact your energy and your emotions. It's okay, leaders, to have a bad day. I'm not saying that. What's not okay is that you let the team experience your poor attitude because of your bad day. Because you're wanting more effort, more engagement, more focus, higher morale from them. And so you've got to go to work on your attitude. And the reason I'm doing this, the first episode of 2025, now's the time to start. Like, if you want 2025 to be the best year ever from your leadership, start right here. Start with understanding your attitude and how it impacts and ripples through the rest of the organization. So that's key number one. Key number two is fostering resilience and optimism. Now, I understand, listening to what I've talked about so far, you might be wondering, where do I even begin? Where do I start with shifting the team's attitude? Here's the simple truth. Resilience starts with you. Resilience is something that has kind of come back into the forefront of our conversations over the last few years. Resilience and overwhelm and wellness and emotional well-being. And resilience, believe it or not, is a muscle that can and must be strengthened. Now, this episode is not really to talk about that. I would highly recommend that you do some study. I highly recommend that you read a book by Angela Duckworth titled Grit, where she talks about strengthening your grit, your resilience, your muscle. Lots of research in that book. I'd highly recommend that you pick that book up and put it on your reading list starting now for this year. A great exercise that I also recommend is a quick mindset check each morning. Ask yourself, how can I approach today's challenges with curiosity versus frustration? How can I walk around being more curious about why someone's performing a certain way, why someone's asking a certain question, why are certain things happening? Be more curious in your leadership. Taking just those 30 seconds to reframe your perspective can help you handle those curveballs with composure, and then that begins to rub off on your team as well. And again, this is partly your attitude. It's a way for you to control your attitude and your energy. In my coaching practice, I often work with leaders to create what I call the most important meeting of the day. I'm not a fan of lots of meetings, but I'm a fan of this meeting. It's the meeting with self, or what I sometimes call the meeting with the mirror. It's a time for you to kind of reflect, look into the mirror, look into the day, and what do you want it to reflect back to you? What is reflecting back to you from that mirror? Is it a good attitude or one that needs work? What do you want the day to reflect back to you from the attitudes of your people, the energy of your people? What they're going to reflect back is what they see from you. And so that meeting with self, starting the day with that meeting with self, that meeting with the mirror, may help you make the adjustments, build this resilience up that you need to help build the resilience up within your team as well. Now, I get what I'm talking about. It's easier said than done. Sometimes leaders face cultural or systemic hurdles that get in the way, where negativity feels ingrained, like the job I spoke about earlier that I was in. I stayed there a little over 3 years too long. And I understand that, but that's why it's also critical to create opportunities for micro moments of positivity. For example, celebrate small wins regularly. Now, if you haven't gotten a copy of my book, Quit Losing Talent, I talk about Engaging in Tactical Praise. I'd recommend maybe you go to Amazon and buy a copy of that book. Just a shameless plug about my book, but celebrating small wins regularly. If you're not doing that as a leader, and again, it's not always about talking about results, even though I do believe in celebrating completions of small tasks on time, but also celebrating like the effort, the attitude at which someone completed something, recognizing it to that individual, and even publicly if they're okay with public praise. Let's think about this. Did your team overcome an unexpected staffing shortage? How did they handle that? What was their attitude like when they did that? Praise them for their effort and their attitude in that. Highlight their achievements in your next team huddle, like where you've got everybody together. What gets celebrated begins to get replicated throughout the team. These great attitudes, these great efforts that you're after. These moments do wonders for reshaping how people view their work environment. So look, again, I'm starting with this episode around attitude at the beginning of a year. It's also in a series of elite leadership lessons that we're going to teach throughout 2025. But I believe this may be the most important lesson that we talk to you about today, because it begins with you. It begins at the beginning of the year. If you can begin to put these small practices into place that we're talking about today and do them consistently throughout 2025, I guarantee you, you will experience elite leadership throughout the year. You will look back and say, wow, look at the difference in my team, my morale, the engagement, the turnover's going down, the retention's going up, the attitude is so much better. Now, there's a lot of other things that you have to practice that we talk about in elite leadership, we talk about in Quit Losing Talent, things that you need to implement in your leadership to be able to do that. Sometimes we've got to get rid of some poor attitudes on the team that are dragging everybody else down. Another conversation for another day. We talk about them in past episodes. We're going to talk about them more this year in 2025 and in future episodes. But what I want to challenge you to do is implement what we're talking about today, like peer recognition. I love the idea of peer recognition. There's something incredibly powerful about celebrating wins together as a team. I call it cheers for peers. Start challenging your team members, your employees, to cheer for each other, to look for wins. We've become habitual in looking for problems with people. And I want to challenge you to start the new year off right. This is an elite leadership principle and philosophy. Start looking for little things that you can celebrate this year and throughout the year, challenging your team members to do the same. And you'll experience a difference in the attitude going forward. And then when things get tough, you'll see that resilience pick up, because now we've got team members who cheer for each other, who push each other forward, who don't allow each other to get stuck. And you don't always have to be the one to do that as the leader when you do it, but you teach and encourage and inspire others to do it. That, my friend, is elite leadership when you're able to do it. Let's look at the third key. It's using real life inspiration and takeaways to push your team forward. I want to leave you with this inspiring story. Many years ago, ESPN wrote a story, and it was intensely inspiring, and it illustrates this idea of attitude better than there's a lot of stories out there, but maybe better than anything we can come up with right now. It's the story of a football player, NFL football player named O.J. Brigance. Many of you may remember him, you may not. You can go look his story up, but he played for the Baltimore Ravens in the 2001 Super Bowl. So it's 20 years ago now, 20 plus years ago, and he was a force to be reckoned with. He was a linebacker in the NFL, a real tough guy. And in 2007, tragedy struck his life. He was diagnosed with ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. It's an incurable disease. I've even had a personal friend pass away from ALS. But progressively that disease stole his ability to use his arms, his ability to walk, and eventually his ability to talk. But what it didn't take was his mind. It didn't take his attitude. And if anyone in the world had an excuse for having a bad attitude, it was certainly O.J. Brigance. And yet, when asked how he was doing, he would reply, "I'm doing more than making it. I'm living it to the best of my ability." Instead of giving up and giving into a defeatist attitude, O.J., he would get up earlier than others. He'd get to work early each day. He went to work as a senior advisor to player development for the Ravens. And he was a key player on team and advising players on playing football and even more on living life to its fullest. And you could bet people listen. Here's a quote from O.J. He said, "Regardless of what we go through in life, there's always purpose wrapped within the pain." So many of you are doing great work. Where can you use a story like that to inspire your team, to inspire individual employees to find purpose within the challenges that they're facing? See, that's attitude. That story from O.J., it reinforces what a great attitude and resilience is all about. It's not about ignoring the tough stuff in life. That's not what we're talking about, but it's about choosing what you amplify as a leader. Choosing how you can use that to amplify and inspire your team as well. What I hope you've done is you've heard some things today as you step into a new year of leadership that will help you just reflect on your attitude. But here's what I want to leave you with. Some takeaways to help you implement the attitude advantage that we've talked about, starting today and using it throughout the year. Number one is be intentional. Begin each day with that mindset check, that meeting with the mirror, meeting with self that we talked about. Align your attitude with the vision you want to embody, that you want reflected back from you and your leadership throughout the day. It begins with you. Highlight success. Look for ways. Be curious. Look for ways to celebrate, not to criticize. Sure, you can walk around and find things that need to be fixed as a leader, but look for small things to celebrate and do that with your team members. What gets celebrated gets replicated. And then finally, lead with perspective, taking the story from O.J. Brigance or any other stories you have in your life and reframe those challenges as opportunities to model resilience for your team at every turn. Here's the challenge for you this week. This year, pick a person, one person on your team who might be struggling, and offer them some encouragement or recognition. A small gesture. Don't do it to manipulate. Do it because you really want to. Be an authentic leader in this. A small gesture can have an enormous impact, and you might just be surprised at what's reflected back to you in the results that you begin to get. I want to thank you for being a continued listener of the Lead Up podcast. I hope you'll join me this year. As I said, this is the first of a series we're going to run on elite leadership lessons. We're also going to have great guests throughout the year. We're going to talk about quit losing talent principles. This year is going to be a year for you to grow from the lessons we teach, but from also the interviews that we provide as well. We're going to challenge you to become an elite leader this year through the Lead Up podcast. I want to ask you to go give us a review, share this podcast with others, leave us a review on your favorite platform. Make sure you're signed up for on our website for all the free resources that we have for you as well. And make it a great year. Make 2025 the best year ever. We'll see you on the next episode of the Lead Up podcast.